Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, and today we have a very special guest joining us on the show. Please give a warm welcome to Carly Broderick, and she's the innovative mind behind Miles Consumer Products, a brand revolutionizing the personal care for teens. Now, Carly's journey is an inspiring tale of entrepreneurship, driven by a desire to make a positive impact in the lives of young people. Now, with her dedication to creating inclusive, empowering products, she's changing the game in the self-care industry, one deodorant at a time. Carly, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Hi, Corey. It's great to be here.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to have you here as well. And this is an interesting space you're in because when I looked at the market space for like care, personal care products and that thing, I didn't really see anyone necessarily talking to the same teen demographic that you are, if you will. So, first, I just want to share, if you will, share a little bit about your journey from being a senior merchandising director at Target to launching this wonderful brand, Miles.
Absolutely. In many ways, I feel like my entire career has led me to this point of founding Miles. I've always been in consumer-facing industries. I worked at Universal Studios in marketing in their consumer products group as the licensor, working with licensees, selling into retail. I, of course, spent 10 years at Target. I was a consultant with small brands and retailers, and then most recently spent 3.5 years as the chief operating officer of a commerce agency called The Stable that worked with emerging and mid-sized brands. And always wanted to start my own consumer brand ever since I left business school, but never had what I thought was going to be a breakthrough enough idea to survive in a very crowded marketplace until I had the idea for Miles.
Hmm.
And what happened was it was early COVID, the spring of 2020. And my son at the time was in fourth grade. And we were in lockdown and figuring out what remote learning looked like. And in public schools in Minnesota, in fourth grade, you start to get health education about your body and how your body is going to change through puberty. Only because we were figuring out remote learning, he got that at home with me, with
Hmm.
the school sent home. So he and I were going through the puberty curriculum, and it got me thinking, gosh, he's going to need deodorant pretty soon. Like, what will I get him? And I know the space probably too well from my professional background. And so I started cycling through, all the choices in the market and really started, discarding one after another for
Hmm.
different reasons. But what really struck me was, gosh, there's no go-to personal care brand in this space for these teens and tweens at a very critical time in their life. Going through puberty is certainly an adventure, both for parents as well as their kids.
Yeah.
There's a lot of changes. And also, it just struck me that, especially through the pandemic, just teens are more anxious, feeling lonely, or feeling less self-confident than ever for a variety of reasons.
Hmm.
And wouldn't it be great if there was just a brand that they can count on to take care of their hygiene needs that they felt was built just for them so
Hmm.
that they could get on, living their best day as their best self. And so
Yeah.
that's really where I conceived of the idea for Miles as a personal care brand for all genders. Really, when you look at the formulations behind deodorants and antiperspirants, they're traditionally merchandised in bricks and mortar retail as like the men's aisle and the women's aisle. But when
Hmm.
you look at the ingredients and you start to dig into the formulation, there's nothing really gender specific about the formulations. It's all scent preference and marketing.
Right.
So I saw an opportunity to just build this brand that was truly inclusive and not tied to some of the stereotypical gender roles that were being portrayed.
As you were telling that story about how you evolved with this brand, I could not help but to think about my mother raised me as a single mom.
Mhm.
And, there's that dynamic of like, as a mom, like, how do I talk to my son about his body? Because I don't have the same parts, And so how could I maybe get his uncle involved or, whatever. But I remember I used to love her cream secret deodorant as a
Yes.
kid. But then I was like also ashamed because the commercial were like strong enough for a man, but made for a woman. So you're right. Like early
Yes.
on, I'm getting like that signal of like, well, is this a bad thing? I like it though, but do I hide my face when I buy it because it's for a woman, but it smells great and it stops my deal, stops my perspiration. So I didn't even realize I had that angst until just now. So you helped me work out some unresolved trauma,
Well,
apparently.
I am I am happy to do so. And I love that you loved the smell of Secret because it is so much about scent preference and like what, smells good to each of us. All of our, makeups are so different. And even the marketing around some of those brands, like I love that you just remembered the tagline, strong enough for a man, but made for a woman.
Hmm.
And uh, when I was going through this journey and looking at different marketing, there's a lot of the legacy brands on the quote unquote men's side of the aisle always portray men the same way. You're physically strong, you're emotionally stoic, you're
Mm.
going to work in a button down and your dress pants. You're working out at the gym, but like not every man is like that. Not every boy is like that. It really
Hmm.
got me thinking like, gosh, if you're not like the athletic kid, what is the choice
What do you
for
do?
the actor or the musician or the scientist or the entrepreneur?
Hmm.
Like, where are those marketing messages?
Yeah.
And
The
so
art kids, all of us kids that were in Glee Club and stuff. We were a little
absolutely.
different. We were a little different.
And that's true, for all genders. I also so after I started thinking about the idea, I learned in retail, like you don't make a decision on a data point of one. So I had to go talk to a lot of parents of teens and tweens. And what I found out is they were feeling very similar to the way that I felt.
Hmm.
But I also learned that there were plenty of girls who were shopping again in the quote unquote men's aisle because they liked the fragrance better.
Yeah.
And it really just comes down to that personal preference.
I love that. I mean, and I think that so often, and we're learning this now, and it's a hot button topic, of course. The whole idea of gender or gender identity. I mean, it's divisive and also inclusive, based on who you talk to. Um, but you're right. We know more now. Speaking about data, we know now that there are people who just do not fit in of this or that and don't want to be categorized as such. And so I just commend you on uh, building a market for or building a brand in that market space. I do wonder, any pushback? Have you found any sort of in this political climate, the whole I think of like bathroom gender assignment sort of stuff when it comes to what you're doing, because there are some people who are triggered easily by these things. Any backlash?
I wouldn't say any outright backlash yet, not to say that that won't happen. I have just run into how ingrained these stereotypes are. I do a lot of events where I sample miles, and I often get parents coming up really interested in the brand, really excited about the fact that it's been designed, especially for their teen.
Right.
But they ask me like, well, which one is the boy scent?
Yeah, yeah.
And I explain, I'm like, hey, I've got all genders liking all of my fragrances. Like, I couldn't tell you that there's only one because I truly see boys and girls coming up to the table and really choosing across the board.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's more about it for me so far. It's been more about breaking through these very like ingrained thoughts that we have,
Hmm.
specifically about personal care products.
Yeah, and those are very antiquated in so many ways. And it makes me think too, again, of being a young person. And when I grew up, distinctively like, I have to like actually figure it out now. Okay. Yeah. So the boys' buttons were on the right side. I didn't even really know anymore.
I
But
know,
that was that was the thing, right? The boys' buttons were on the right and girls were on the left. That was a big deal in my family. I mean, you could come downstairs in this fabulous coat and everyone would love it. And then they go, are those buttons on the wrong? And all hell would break loose. So
crazy.
it's
Yeah.
interesting that we had those sort of barriers, and I think it's so um well, I hate to use this, it's a big word, but it's oppressive. It's very oppressive to sort of raise people in that construct. And I think you're, helping break that oppression, if you will. Do you think that word is a bit too strong, or do you think there is some oppression with that kind of marketing?
I definitely think there is in the marketing because if you don't fit what's being portrayed in that marketing, it makes you feel it can make you feel lesser than, or where do I fit?
Hmm.
Gosh, that must be like the norm,
Yeah.
am I different?
Hmm.
And I have such empathy and respect and like a desire to help like Gen Z and the Alpha generation because they're such a creative generation. They've
Hmm.
gone through a ton with everything that's been happening in our world.
Yeah.
They are so individual in discovering who they are. Like I really just want to do what I can as a brand to help empower that and let Miles be a brand that they don't have to fit into, but a brand that reflects who they are in their individuality, which I I know is extremely aspirational, and they're a very savvy market. They're a savvy audience to market to.
Hmm.
I truly I want the brand to help just reflect who they are versus the brand telling them who they are.
And that's amazing because that is when it comes to marketing. I come from, you mentioned the tagline. I think I'm probably more in tune with that stuff because I'm a copywriter and I began
Oh,
doing work at like Madison Avenue, Young and Rubicam, and that's the
oh
whole
my gosh.
world,
Yeah.
so that's like the tagline Hall of Fame kind of stuff. And you're right. The job was to tell the public who they were. I mean, this is like late 90s. That's kind of the role of advertising. So to take the approach of like, well, who do you think you are? We're going to give you all these options and you just decide. That's a kind of very radical approach in marketing. And I think it's great. And I just want to also ask you the name, Miles. First thing that comes to mind with me to me is a man's name, but then
Yeah.
also it comes to the journey.
Yeah.
So for you, what was the inspiration behind the name?
Great question. And it's one I get all the time. People will often ask, like, oh, is Miles your son? And it's not. My son's name is Jack.
Okay.
I chose Miles exactly that, Corey, because of a journey. So puberty is fierce. Going through your teen years are an adventure, and Miles is here for that journey. So I
Hmm.
really wanted to lean into the idea of this being a brand that accompanies you through this very exciting time in your life, which can
Hmm.
be challenging and confusing. And it's, puberty is full of all kinds of twists and turns. But knowing that Miles is a go-to brand by your side.
Hmm. Again, I have to say, I'm so comforted by this. I mean, of course, I'm past that time in my life, but when it comes to, you just tapped into the awkwardness and the beauty and the splendor and the wonder of that time, it's all those things. And
Oh,
most of us, God willing, we look back on that as being that magical time for ourselves. Um, the more support we give those generations who are going through it, I think the more grounded they'll be, the more better off they'll be in society because they feel like they have that support. So, we're talking about it from a deodorant, but I mean, it's amazing, what I think that would do just to let young people know that the consumer giants or the people who make the decisions that's on the shelves have thought of me
yeah.
individually as well. It's a really powerful thing. Now,
And
do
actually,
you have
one of the
other, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, it's one of the reasons why I started with deodorant, because really outside of your toothbrush, a deodorant is the first product that you start to use that's truly your own. Like you
Hmm.
might share shampoo in the shower with family members or body wash or soap, but usually you don't share deodorant. And so that's truly like your first personal care product that's your own. And it also represents, it's a sign of that you're growing up because you need it. And so that was why I started with deodorant and antiperspirant. But I think you were about to ask me if I was going to expand into other.
I was good. Yes, you're very psychic. Yes. So I was wondering because do you have other products in the line, and if not, which ones will you be developing?
Yes. So I'm in development right now on a couple more body care SKUs. So think cleansing like body wash, also body sprays. And then within deodorants, I'm introducing this idea that you can, oftentimes as adults, we think like, oh, I always wear the XYZ scent of my deodorant. I don't vary from that. And this generation is so into fragrance, it's really been surprising to me how much this generation has like appreciated all the scents that Miles is bringing to the table.
Hmm.
Also, the sophistication that sometimes they're smelling, and it in part is probably because the beauty industry with teens and tweens, as we read all the time, is just
Yeah.
booming. So I'm using the idea of drop culture. So think of like sneaker drops or hoodie drops,
Hmm.
and extending that to deodorant and introducing limited time only scents and packaging theme tied to milestones in a teen life,
Hmm.
in a teen's life. So I just introduced Spring Break, which launched a couple weeks ago, and here's the packaging. It's Spring Break is something that happens to every kid. Like they always
Yeah.
get, school always closes down for that 1 week, usually somewhere between February through April, depending on
Hmm.
where you are in the country. And it's just a time to like take a break from school and regroup. So we'll continue to introduce these limited time only scents timed to
Hmm.
different moments in a teen life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. I mean, and that's a smart, um, like a smart long-term sort of vision for the brand because there always are going to be products. I mean, and you don't even at that point, you may go beyond personal care products. I mean, that can take you into apparel and just a whole other place as long as you continue to talk to people who just say, hey, I don't want to really be one thing or the other. I want to just wake up and have options,
Yes.
which we have far too few of. Um, have you found that there's more of a, if we do look at the male female demographic, do you find just from a scientific standpoint, I'm curious, that more females or more males seem to be interested in your products, or is it sort of a mixed balance? What do you think about those numbers?
I think from what I see at marketing events that I do, it's a very even balance. My primary sales channel is on Amazon, and I don't necessarily see the gender of the end user because oftentimes it's a parent or a caregiver who's buying deodorant to then give to their child.
Hmm.
But I would say quantitative or qualitatively, I think it's probably a 60-40 split between boys and girls.
Hmm.
So pretty
Interesting.
even.
Yeah. And I think I read, I mean, my numbers might be off here, but did you have like a growth of like 250% in sales or like some like really big number?
Yeah,
Um,
I think that was in one of the articles.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm in year two, and year two is off to a really strong start.
Hmm.
I think there's been, growing brand awareness for a new brand is always a challenge. Like I said, consumers are so savvy, they're seeing so many messages every day. But Miles is really resonating and really filling this white space for teens and tweens. And
Hmm.
as a result, the growth our second year has been really strong.
Yeah. And you did mention, of course, that a really amazing idea for spring break, which even that takes you into like a young college age demographic too. Because right, between 18 and 20, kids who are in their first and second year of college, you then have a chance to even have an adult evolution with your brand, which I think is also really important. I do wonder though, with that kind of growth, it took some obvious strategies and other really important ways to sort of market your brand and stand out from the rest. So, are there any other sort of campaign ideas or strategies that you can share that you implemented that really separated you from the others?
Um, that's a great question. I'd have to think about that just for a second because
Sure, sure.
there is, so with personal care in teens and tweens, I am marketing to two audiences, and I call them the purchaser and the influencer of the purchase. So the
Mm,
purchaser is typically a parent or a caregiver of the teen or tween.
right.
Like most teens aren't buying their own deodorants. But then there's the influence of the purchaser, which is the teen or tween themselves.
Hmm.
And so taking an approach where I'm figuring out how I talk to both audiences, I think has helped Miles stand out and break through because
Mm,
it needs to be like safe enough and affordable enough for parents and caregivers to feel they can trust Miles, but it has to be cool enough that the kids want it and want to wear it.
mm,
And so
absolutely.
figuring out how to balance, that teeter-totter, I think has helped us break through in year one.
Hmm.
Um, and then
Yeah.
Amazon honestly has been a great place to launch because um, it's an easy purchase. It's where a lot of parents and caregivers are already shopping, so it's easy to add Miles to their basket.
Hmm.
Um, and it's been an easy, sort of a seamless purchase journey when I've been talking about Miles on social media or in other digital channels. It's an easy transition to just hop over to Amazon and add Miles to your cart.
Sure. And you are available though in brick and mortar stores as well as online, or are you just online mainly your sales?
Just online right now.
Hmm.
Yeah, but
Okay.
expanding into bricks and mortar next year.
Yeah. Because I was like, when I was thinking, I was like, certain brands, like, who knows what those sort of back end situations are business wise. But I was just thinking about like Sephora. That's a place that Sephora has not been in. I thought, well, that'd be a kind of cool partnership. Or just, all of a sudden, I was like on your marketing team for a couple seconds. So don't mind me. It's just
Hey, I will take it.
the young and Rubicam kicked in. I just can't help it. It's like a muscle I can't turn off. But
I know I might have to tap into your copyright skills and we can work
yes,
slogans
okay.
for ourselves.
Yes, believe me, I'll make sure you have my information. So, but also, do you get involved? I was wondering too when it comes to the brand, and I mentioned politics, and you sort of, in a weird way, they're sort of you can't really separate them in some aspects. Do you feel like you are also contributing to a bigger conversation when it comes to maybe what diversity and inclusivity means to the entire community versus it being like kind of sort of in a marketing context? You feel, I guess, I mean, do you feel like there is a social sort of deliverable for what you're doing in general for the greater good, not just for the product sales?
You know, when I'm talking about being an inclusive brand that wants this very diverse generation, the most gender fluid generation we've seen, when I want to be a go-to brand for that audience, I think I absolutely end up in a social cause position. So, for
Hmm.
example, last year during Pride Month, Miles did give back to Glisten, which is a really awesome LGBTQ plus nonprofit that works to provide resources to schools for kids. And that was important for the brand, talking about being for all genders, for all
Hmm.
kids, and again, being a reflection of who they are versus trying to tell someone who they are.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I see Miles continuing to have a role in social issues like that.
Hmm. No, absolutely. And it's one of those things too where, like I said, you're on one hand, you're like, hey, I just want to make some deodorant and help some kids. But next thing you know, we are all seemingly given the opportunity to kind of, I hate to say pick a side, but to support a cause and it becomes important to us to do. And you're never going to please everyone. So at some point, you just take a stand on what you believe in. And in fact, I wrote an article last year during Pride Month just about allyship, how to be an ally to the LGBTQ community because people don't know. And that's a prime example of just using your brand to help those kids out or people who are young and unaware. And it's just
Yeah,
a little bit of help for a demographic that might need more care than others often give them, you know?
absolutely. I totally
Yeah,
agree. I'll have to
that's
look at that.
amazing.
I'll look up your article. I would love to read it.
Yes, thank you. I'll send it to you. I'll make sure you get the link to it. It's one of those things, and it's very funny. I will say, just to bring that up, this podcast has been on for many, many, many years, and in the past couple of years that I've had the podcast is where we kind of started really delving into a lot more social the backgrounds, people from different backgrounds, and I've had like Olympic diver Greg Louganis on, for example, was like one of my heroes. Maybe in the entire 10 years or so of the podcast, there's been like five gay people on
Oh,
as guests because I've just maybe five or six that I brought on, but people are still sending me emails about like, why'd you have them on? That's too gay. I'm like, it's been five people in like 10 years. That's too many, but I guess you just have, some people just kind of are always going to be sort of closed-minded and it's hard to do that. So I just appreciate what you're doing with your brand. So what is next beyond the product lines? You mentioned some new things. Are there other directions you'd like to take the brand? Do you see some other growth opportunities where you'd like to go in the future?
it is so early on for Miles, and this space is dominated by really large multinational
Mm,
legacy brands that
yeah.
I think continuing on the path that I'm on with personal care will take up a great deal of time in the first couple of years. But
Hmm.
I'm very bullish on being able to get there and really making Miles the go-to choice for teens and tweens and their parents.
Yes. Well, listen, you are on your way because as we've seen, no, really, as we've seen, our um our young people are different. They are more vocal about who they are and not wanting to be conformists. And no one is really speaking to them in this space. And so I see a direct parallel to what Kara did with Hint. And I wish you so much success with this. And I think this is just a great thing you're doing. And I appreciate you being here today and talking about it. And so, Miss Carly Broderick, innovative mind behind Miles Consumer Products, thank you so much for being here today on Motivational Mondays.
Thank you. Thank you, Corey. I appreciate it.